welcome to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory, and if you've never seen this show before, what we do here is we read folklore and fairy tales live with a little bit of sound effects. And if you're here live, there is a live chat where you can jump in and you can say hello and talk to the wonderful people there that are there, which is, according to legend, the greatest live chat on the internet. But if you're not watching this live, you do have an advantage. Down in the description below, there will be timestamps for each of the stories that we read tonight. And if you just want to jump ahead to certain ones, you can do that. I'm going to turn my music down a bit. And tonight, we're reading stories from Iceland as we continue our way through Jan Arnarsson's book. Of course, peppered in with other stuff as appropriate. If you've caught a few of the last episodes, I've already sort of said what I wanted to say about that. But what I will say is that, what I will repeat, if this is the first one you're seeing, is that a lot of Icelandic tales were the inspiration for a lot of Tolkien's tales. The rumor, or more than a rumor, I think it's pretty much the story goes, that he had a caretaker for his children who was Icelandic and used to tell them Icelandic tales. Like them and incorporated elements of them, and I think overall the feel of them have a very Tolkien feel. Anyways, I will say hello to the chat. I will talk very briefly. There isn't much to be said here. We're talking about cryptids of the water here, about the stories, and we'll get right to the stories. I will say I think I'm coming down with something. My partner is currently unwell, so we'll see how far I make it. If my throat starts to fade on me or whatever, because it seems to be a throat thing, I may have to cut it a little early. That's about it, but we'll see how it goes. This music is still a little bit on the loud side. Let's take that down. Jump Store notes that it's Iceland again. I'm happy that it's Iceland again. I'm really enjoying these stories. Zombie Wolf seems to agree, likes the Icelandic tales. If you don't like the Icelandic tales, don't worry. I mean, the way the structure of the stream is that I tend to work through, when I find a good collection, I'll work through it, and then we'll sort of move on to other things. And Suki Matsuba says hello. Hello, Suki, and thank you for watching. Zombie Wolf says, ooh, a new face. Hey there, Suki. Yeah, Zombie Wolf, she's a bit of a classic who hasn't been here in a bit. Anyways, let's talk about water monsters for a moment. The thing that stands out for me about the stories tonight is some of the descriptions that they give, I can't really follow very well, so I'll be curious to see how people interpret some of these descriptions of cryptids and monsters and creatures. Zombie Wolf says, drink some chamomile tea. It's anti-inflammatory and it'll give you a good night's sleep. Good idea. What we're going to look at today is a description of creatures from the sea mostly. I mean, it's Iceland. There's mostly the sea is the water. I think only one of them isn't the sea, actually. They seem to wrap themselves a lot around cattle and land animals like horses being the basis for their cryptids from the sea and water. Which I think the first thing that comes to mind for most people when they hear that, if they're into this stuff, is kelpies, because the Scottish kelpie is a spirit that is often said to have shapeshifted into a water-going horse. These are not like kelpies really at all. Kelpies are shapeshifters. They're spirits that can look like women and various other creatures. We're going to look at stories that are much more varied in that strange Icelandic way. Fire is a bit loud. Okay, let's take that fire down. I can see it's much higher than it was before. That's weird. Okay. Also, I don't have chamomile tea, but maybe I will try it. Zombie Wolf, thank you for the recommendation. that's what we're doing tonight. We're going to read a little section here from Jan Arnesson's book on mermen, water horses, which I described in the title currently. It might change it later depending on how YouTube responds to titles, as double-decker horses, which isn't the best description of it, but it was the fastest way to get the image across. I'll be curious what you guys would have titled it instead when we get to the description of the very, very weird horse monster in this. All right. Oh, wow. The internet is getting to know me too well. Jumstore says, my go-to tea for when I'm feeling sick is ginger tea. But I remember that Rory mentioned he's allergic to ginger. I did. When the hell did I say that? I am, that's true. Okay. Tonight's stories all come to us from Jan Arnesson's Icelandic Legends, Volume 1, I think. There are several volumes of it, and it's a little confusingly published, but I believe it's Volume 1. And our first story tonight is very basically called The Merman. So let's take ourselves to the ocean. Actually, I'm going to do that again because I just realized I've not set up the water. There we go. Jumstore says you mentioned it when we were talking about eggnog. This is how my life is. People will tell me I've said things and I don't remember. Everyone's paying attention to me but me. Our first tale tonight is called The Merman, as collected by Jan Arnesson and Icelandic Legends, Volume 1. Long ago, a farmer lived at Vogar, who was a mighty fisherman, and of all the farms round about, not one was so well situated with regard to the fisheries as his. One day, according to custom, he had gone out fishing, having cast down his line from the boat, and waited a while and found it very hard to pull up again, as if there was something very heavy at the end of it. Imagine his astonishment when, after great effort, he found that he'd caught a great fish, but with a man's head and body. And when he saw that this creature was alive, he addressed it and said, "Who and whence are you?" We need to bring back whence as a word. That's a great word. "A mermaid from the bottom of the sea," was the reply. Well, the farmer then asked him what he'd been doing when the hook caught his flesh. The other replied, "I was turning the cowl of my mother's chimney pot to suit it to the wind. So let me go again, will you?" "Not for the present," said the fisherman. "You shall serve me a while first." So without more words, he dragged him into the boat and rowed to shore with him. And when he got to the boathouse, the fisherman's dog came to him, tail wagging and yipping and barking and fawning joyfully. But his master's temper being none of the best, he struck the poor animal, whereupon, seeing him hit the animal, the mermaid laughed for the first time. Having fastened the boat, don't worry, they do address it in the story, him hitting his dog. Having fastened the boat, he went towards his house, dragging his prize with him, over the fields, and stumbling over a hillock which lay in his way, cursed it heartily. Whereupon the merman laughed for the second time. And when the fisherman arrived at the farm, his wife came out to receive him and embraced him affectionately and received her salutations with pleasure. Whereupon the merman laughed for the third time. Then said the farmer to the merman, "You have laughed 3 times, and I'm curious to know why you have laughed. Tell me, therefore." "Never will I tell you," replied the merman, "unless You promised to take me to the same place in the sea wherefrom you caught me, and there to let me go free again. So the farmer made him the promise. Well, said the merman, I laughed the first time because you struck your dog, whose joy at meeting you was real and sincere. Well, the second time because you cursed the mound over which you stumbled, which was full of golden ducats. And the third time because you received with pleasure your wife's clearly empty and flattering embrace, who is clearly faithless to you and a hypocrite. And now be an honest man and take me out to sea whence you've brought me. The farmer replied, 2 things you have told me I have no means of proving, namely the faithfulness of my dog and the faithlessness of my wife. But the third I will try the truth of, and if the hillock contain gold, then I will believe the rest. Accordingly he went to the hillock, and having dug it up, found therein a great treasure of golden ducats, as the merman had told him. After this the farmer took the merman down to the boat, and to that place in the sea whence he had caught him. And before he put him in, the latter said to him, Farmer, you've been an honest man, and I will reward you for restoring me to my mother. If only you have skill enough to take possession of property that I shall throw your way, be happy and prosper. Then the farmer put the merman into the sea, and he sank out of sight. It happened that not long after, 7 sea-gray cows were seen on the beach close to the farmer's land. I'm going to pause here for a moment and say, he seems to be talking about actual cows, not sea cows. They just have a gray sea color. I found that confusing when I first read it. These cows appeared to be very unruly and ran away directly. The farmer approached them. So he took a stick and ran after them, possessed with the fancy that if he could burst the bladder which he saw in the nose of each of them, they would belong to him. He contrived to hit out the bladder of the nose of one cow, which then became so tame that he could easily catch it, while the others leaped into the sea and disappeared. The farmer was convinced that this was the gift of the merman, and a very useful gift it was, for better cow was never seen nor milked in all the land, and she was the mother of the race of grey cows so much esteemed now. And the farmer prospered exceedingly, but never caught any more mermen. As for his wife, nothing further is told of her about her, so we can repeat nothing. Now here's the thing. I really don't know if they're trying to say, because obviously the bladder on the nose makes me think of, sea cows. And they run off into the water like sea cows. But then he talks about milking it later and it being the genesis of cows. So I'm not sure if they're trying to say they came ashore as sea cows. He smacked it in the face and it turned into a cow. Your guys' call on this one. I don't necessarily understand the imagery of that. Tammy is here. Hello, Tammy. It's good to see you. I hope you're still feeling better. Okay. Carrying on with our... what I think is probably one of the most unusual pieces of water monster lore here. And when I say unusual, I don't mean like wildly weird. Just why is it the way that it is? This one is called Nennir, or the one who feels inclined. Which, by the context of the story, I believe is what Nennir means. But I don't speak Icelandic, so it's hard to say. All right. Let's put a little light rain on this. Our next story is called Nennir, or The One Who Feels Inclined, and it also comes to us from Jan Arnesson's collection of Icelandic legends. There was once a girl who'd been charged by her master to look after some ewes which were lost. She'd gone a long way after them until she was quite tired. When suddenly she saw before her a gray horse. Much delighted at this, she went up to it and bound her garter into its mouth for a bridle. But just as she was going to mount, she said, "I feel afraid. I feel half inclined not to mount this horse." And as soon as the animal heard these words, it leaped into some water that stood near and disappeared. Then the girl saw that this was a river horse. Now the nature of this animal is that it cannot bear to hear its own name. Nennir, or the one who feels inclined, which is the reason why it jumped into the water when the girl said, "I feel afraid. I am half inclined not to mount this horse," for she had unwittingly said its name. Now the same is the effect on the river horse if it hears the name of the devil, which it just drops in there. But then it adds this wonderful little detail of another story. Let's listen to another story. 3 children were playing together on the shingly bank of a river when they saw a gray horse standing there near them. And they went up to it to look at it. And one of the children mounted on its back, and after him another, to have a ride for pleasure, and only the eldest was left. They asked him to follow, "For," they said, "the horse's back is surely long enough for all 3 of us." But the child refused and said, "I do not feel inclined." No sooner were the words out of his mouth than the horse leaped into the river with the 2 other children, who were both drowned. Well, only the eldest survived to tell the story of Nennir, the gray river horse. How's that for a turn? Tammy says, doing much better and lots of honey and tea. Ooh. Does everyone know that honey is a natural antibiotic? And I don't mean that in like a hippie kind of way where it's kind of sketchy science. I mean, it used to be used to treat wounds and stuff because it actually kills bacteria. It is naturally antibiotic. Did people know that? I imagine lots of people know that. But maybe you don't. Our next story is called The Lake Monster, which is about as straightforward as you get for the theme. This is actually a Christmas story that I almost read for a Christmas show, and then I decided against it. Jumpstore says honey is also anti-inflammatory. I did not know that, but it doesn't surprise me. Honey is oddly medicinal for what it is. The other thing you can do if you have a sore throat, of course, is gargle salt water. But honey helps as well. I won't pretend to know why. I do know that high levels of sugar can kill off bacteria. Like, you can preserve things in sugar, but I don't think that's what's going on with honey. I think it actually has something to do with an enzyme with the bees. Anyhow, our next story is called The Lake Monster. It also comes to us from Jan Arnesson's Icelandic legends. In the last century, a man lived in the North Country called Kolben, who was very poor. But everybody liked him for his good heart and treated him with kindness. Once, on the day before Christmas Eve, late at night, he went over the lake Vestara, which was frozen, to beg some food for the next day from one of the farmers on the other side. The farmer gave him a smoked carcass of mutton, with which Kolben returned joyfully homewards. When he was about the middle of the lake, he heard a noise behind him. He turned around and he saw the ice crack and a monster rise from it, having 8 feet and looking like 2 horses joined by their tails with their heads facing opposite ways. The monster ran after Kolben, who saw no chance of escape, so he dropped the carcass of mutton and took to his heels with all the speed he could muster. The next morning, he went out again on the ice to see how much might be left of his mutton, but only found a few chewed bones. He took some of his neighbors to look at these bones, and they pitied him so much that they soon made up his loss to him. This is the picture we have on the front of him running from the 2 horses. What would you do if 2 horses joined at the butt, burst out of a frozen lake? The jump story says a lot of people have hot water with lemon and honey if they have a sore throat, so if you don't have chamomile tea, Rory, you might do that. It's a good idea, Jump Story. Thank you. I'm reminded of that mutton story for those who watched it, of my last episode before Christmas, where I told you the story about if you sit at a crossroads, you'll get gold. And then there was a guy who failed to do that because somebody offered him mutton, and he was like, I forget what he says exactly, but I'll never reject mutton. I think this guy would have been eaten by a horse. GS says, I'd duck behind a rock. Yeah, but you're on a frozen lake. No rocks out there. All right. This one takes us back to the sea. And this is actually our last story of the night. And the only reason I'm doing it shorter is, as I said, I'm a little under the weather. And when I was planning it today, I was like, I don't know how much of me will be available for the stream later, and I didn't want to overcommit. But that's okay. We're reading actually every story in here about the water monsters, because there aren't that many. But the last one is a doozy. This one story is called Naddi, and it comes to us again from Jan Arneson's collection of Icelandic legends. In ancient times, there was a main road from Njarðvík to Borgarfjörður, which passed over a steep mountain sloping down to the sea. But this road became unfrequented because a monster, a half-man, half-beast, took up his abode upon it, and after nightfall used to destroy so many travelers that the way was at length considered impassable. This creature hid itself in a rocky gulf on the seaside of the mountains, which has since been called the Gulf of Naddi. This name arose from the fact that as people passed, a strange rattling was heard among the stones at the bottom. Now it happened once, in autumn, that a certain man stopped at a farm in the neighborhood who intended late in the evening to cross this part of the mountain, and was not to be dissuaded from his determination by the entreaties of the farmer and his family. So he started off with the words, "As long as I fear nothing, nothing can harm me." And when he came to the gulf, he met with the monster, and it at once attacked it. And they had a long and fearful struggle together there along the ridge over the high and stormy seas. In the fight, they came together to the verge of that precipice, which has since been called Krasjarar. Over this, the man hurled the monster, And afterwards, upon this very spot, raised a cross with this inscription. I'm going to do my best to do some Latin here, which I'm not good at. Effigium Christi qui pronis honora, which they give us no translation of, but I will tell you, roughly stands for prostate, honor the image of Christ, you who come forward, which I guess means bow down to the image of Christ. But I will say that is translated by Google, and Google is famously bad at translating Latin. The man came to Njarðvík, black and blue with his struggle, and after having kept his bed for a month, recovered. Never was this fearful sea monster seen after it had been vanquished by a human being, and the man soon forgot his bruises in the glory of having rid his country of such a plague. Jumstore says, nothing can harm me. I'm sure this won't be an ironic story of hubris. It wasn't. I'm with you when I was reading it. But I guess that speaks to a different kind of ethos, doesn't it? You know, it speaks to this idea that it's about heroes, right? You know, it's about heroic people who can protect things and they win. They were less concerned, you know, overall in most of these stories I found to really drive home cautionary tales. It mostly seems to be about being bold enough to do something, which is a smarter and better educated person on these topics than me could probably do something quite interesting with the fact that a great deal of Icelandic tales that we've read so far from Jan Arneson's collection, which might be selectively put together. You know, sometimes people put these things together to sort of feed a national mythos. I don't know if that's the case with Jan. But what I will say is, at least the versions of tales that we're seeing here from him, there's a very opposite instinct that the best thing to do is to be bold and go and try the dangerous thing. Zombie Wolf says, looking at these Icelandic names, I'm surprised Roy tries to pronounce these. I would have given up and said, let's call him Pat. I mean, I do my best. I would say some languages I think I get pretty close on, and some I know I'm off because it's just too far removed from English. And I would say Icelandic is definitely one of the hardest I've had to do. And I can only apologize to the nation of Iceland and their lovely language that I am surely doing violence to. It's the least intuitive. I feel like German has the most in common with English pronunciations. It definitely has differences, but it feels similar to speak. It's more intuitive, but Icelandic is never intuitive. Same with Irish. Irish is never pronounced how I expect it to, and it's a very hard language to find pronunciation guides for, so sometimes I'm just flying blind. I have some Irish friends, and sometimes I will, online friends, and I will email or send them emails or send them texts or something, and I'll be like, do you know how to pronounce this word? I can't find it anywhere, and sometimes even they haven't heard of it because the Irish tales I read are using some fairly old Irish, apparently. I know this is the shortest one we've done in a while, but I can feel already that my throat is drying out, and I probably made the right call. So I will say I don't know how I'll hold up for Thursday. We'll see about Thursday. If I go the direction that my partner, who's a little further ahead of me in it, I don't think I'll be doing anything for the next 2 days at the minimum. But in case not, I hope to see you then. Tammy says, my daughter helped me name my puppy. I picked the Japanese name flower Shizuka. Sorry. Oh, lovely. Yeah, Jumpstore says a word that I know how to pronounce, but I don't trust my memory. But it's an Irish word that often gets pronounced as Samhain. Tammy says, thank you very much, Rory, for doing the live stream, even though you're feeling under the weather. Get some rest, stay warm. Hope you feel better soon. Everyone have a wonderful night. Feel better soon, Rory. Thanks for the stream, Zombie Wolf ads. Well, thank you very much, Tammy. And thank you, Zombie Wolf. And thank you, Jump Store. I hope you guys enjoyed the tales. And, yeah. I do feel like I would continue blabbing, but I think it's probably best for everyone that I go. I have a different outro and a different intro splash and song this time. So if you're curious about it, you stick around and listen to that. But as for me, I'll be back when I feel well enough to talk. Thank you very much for watching tonight and enjoying our tales. I'll keep the fire warm. You have a good sleep.